I would like today to talk about our parents and what it is losing them. I have this thought over and over again. I have my parents are alive. Your mom passed away recently. Um, yeah, I would like to understand how to cope with it, what it is, and what learnings did you get from it?
One thing I realize is that everyone mourns in their own way. And so I've been pretty patient, not that I've had to be, but I've been just watching people and observing how people receive death. Being a physician in the hospital, I've pronounced hundreds of people. I've written the paperwork. I've held many hands at the end of their lives. Um, and of course, it's different when I see my mother. I was meant to visit my mom just 5 weeks ago, and really 36 hours before I was supposed to see her, she didn't wake up. And so, being so far away, being in Asia when she's in the east coast of the US, I scrambled to get to the airport, and in a 24-hour journey, sitting, I was on Korean Air, so I've got two guys on each shoulder, and I'm crying and writing on my laptop, just just thoughts that showed up. Um, and what came up for me was just really appreciation. Um, I did ponder before all of this was occurring. I wondered how I'd feel actually. I had seen my mom in August, just 3 weeks earlier in India. We got to visit her childhood home with my brother and my wife and kids. Um, and somehow appreciating that life is short. For the previous months, I'd been wanting to ask her a whole bunch of questions, and she was gracious enough to receive them. So I mentioned to you, so I'm wandering a little bit, but I'll try to get back. Um, I mentioned to you that somebody asked me to consider once, at some point, if you imagine your parents living to a certain age, and I imagine their parents' death age as a possible goal, and then see how many years difference there is from that to their current age. And then if you have a certain number of meals per year, say 2 or 4 or 8, and then you multiply that times the number of years, whatever the number is, it's less than infinite. We just assume that they're going to always be there. Um, and so I've tried that exercise a few times in the recent past, and just really appreciating each goodbye, especially that it might be the last goodbye, and if I would do anything differently. And this last month, we had time together, and my wife was especially instrumental in this because she gave us time. She took my kids away one day early to leave Kerala to go north to northern India to visit friends, and and my brother were able to spend like 24 hours sitting around the table, just sharing stories, laughing, and a little bit crying. And I got to ask questions of her that I would say she's been avoiding for years, but maybe I just wasn't committed to bringing them up. Um, and I said to her, this is literally 7 weeks ago, and my mom died 4 weeks ago. Um, I said I'd like to be an open and honest man, and part of that includes being in an open and honest family to the extent that I can affect that. And we have secrets in our family, and I'd like to be able um, to bring them up because someone tells me a secret, I'm honoring their need for protection, and then at some point I realize I'm a grown ass man.
Yeah,
Sorry if I can't say certain words.
you get yeah.
And and she was receptive. Um, so I live in a space where I'm really appreciating more than regretting. I've thought for the past month about how we've been, and I feel really. Do I feel good? I feel appreciative. I just feel just like I felt when my kid was born. When my child was born, I immediately loved my parents more because it became so immediately clear how much I loved my child and how much I imagined that they must have loved me. and whether it's biological or spiritual or religious, it just felt like, wow, I'm so lucky to have been protected by them, to be cared for by them, and they did their best. And I hope I just do my best for my kid. Your question is about navigating mourning. The phrase that comes to mind as you ask that is, how do I honor my words with action?
Okay.
You're talking about soul to soul. You are listening for soul to soul. You're listening to scrape away all the layers of crap and responsibility and avalanche of cultural crap that sits over us, that we have to protect from ourselves to look good, to seem impressive, to seem like we have one more dollar than our friend.
Yeah.
And so, like, listening for what my soul cries for, and it really cries to be like a joyful kid.
Yeah.
And how do I find that as an adult who has responsibilities and skills and taxes to pay?
It's a very good point. 'Cause at the end of the day, we act out too much, but nothing really changes. We just put a lot of masks on us to act cool, but in the end, when I look at my kids, and sometimes they trigger me, and I'm like, stop doing this. But I'm like, it's not their issue, it's my issue of not being able to handle their openness and their freedom and being completely vulnerable to that.
Yeah, I'm torn about that often. When my voice gets raised, or if I'm short with my kids, or if they should just have already understood or read my mind, or internalized a lesson that I learned 20 years ago. Overall, I'm very impressed with my kids that they're learning things before my age, from reading to asking pointed questions to feeling like they have a say. When my kids speak up, they instead of saying I have an idea, they look at me and my wife and they say, "Appa, Appa, I have a really good idea."
That's
and the confidence and the playfulness, we're just trying to listen for, like, how do we maximize that playfulness, because geometry and algebra and handwriting, hopefully that all comes in parallel.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Back to losing parents.
Yeah.
I haven't experienced that, but if I have to imagine how that would feel like, this is some part of identity that is lost forever. Am I right about it? Like, there's a lot of baggage and there's a lot of learnings that parents give to us and support us, and then there must be feeling of, okay, I'm more lonely than before in this world.
I don't know. I don't think you have to be committed to that being the truth, since, I mean, you're a curious guy. You're always wondering, and that's why I think people are drawn to you, because I think they're curious, and sometimes they don't feel they have the permission to do that. When I teach yoga, I find myself saying, here, being in a natural setting, that if you walked past a leaf and saw it, there's literally a molecule from that leaf that is now in something you call yourself. To the extent that I say, this is my finger, or this is my elbow, or this is my shoulder, literally a molecule from a leaf you saw this morning is in that spot. And at some point later, it'll trade out. And at some point later, it'll go into you. And so I very literally ask my students and myself to consider that we're sculpting, molecularly resculpting with every breath. And so if you're holding your breath, or you're building stress, or you're building tension, and there's like difficulty, and you're more achy, or like it's all a living entity, right? So it's moving and exchanging. And my father said at my mother's viewing, we got to see her body laid out at the funeral home. He said, now she lives on, like, through us. And I have to, and there's something so powerful about being there, seeing, I say seeing her, but she wasn't there. I see her face was full of life. It was always joking, or being sarcastic, or being the smartest person in the room, or a little judgmental, or a lot judgmental. And that spirit was not in this body at all. And it was just reassuring. I don't know if it was reassuring. It just became abundantly clear that she wasn't in that body, but she was in the room. She was within us. and we live on through. Some of us know her recipes. She didn't convey all those. When I asked for recipes, she'd do them real quick, so I would always have to come back for the meal. Now it's with my cousins and their skills, and I'll try to find some of those. Um, but I do feel that that we live on, and I find physics and meditation and all of these practices are coming together to say everything is one thing, that within a body, that within a molecule, that there's some way that everything relates to everything. And so I've being in a space of gratitude, of appreciation, um, makes it easier. Um, having found, I think having found the confidence or the guts or the courage to bring up things that I've always wanted to know with my mom, to ask, you can, and if she was gone, I might write her a letter. I might still write her a letter today. It feels right to do, to show my appreciation and ask questions to the universe and see what shows up. But to ask her live, to have closure with the things that really haunted me, things I didn't bring up for 40 years. There's just so much appreciation that she's in the room. She's supporting me, and she raised two strong boys, who are now hopefully two strong men.
Amazing. Are you open to go into there to talk about those things that brought you closure? Maybe inspire some other people to talk to their parents, including myself. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna take a step back, because me and my parents are not very close, but there are always some things that are untold, and sometimes I think, like, I don't want to bring that up for a reason that for something inside me thinks that this might ruin a thin relationship we already have. But on the other end, I think it might make it stronger. So I'm really curious. If you want to share it, I'm open. If not, we don't have to go there.
I think the question I would ask, and I think that you already do subconsciously or maybe deliberately here in this room, the question I ask myself when I'm at a negotiation for business, or as a yoga teacher, or as someone's doctor in the hospital, the question I ask myself, and now more subconsciously, but that I would do more deliberately early on, is what's the promise that I made to this audience? What is a promise that this person or this group of people thinks that I made to be in front of these people in this way? And then the other question becomes, what am I committed to creating once I'm there? Excuse me. And so that's what I was looking for. I didn't want, we had, my brother and I, I'll have to cut mention of my brother in the last sentence. But I myself had some kind of trauma as a child, and I could only share it with my parents once I felt I could make it beyond their responsibility. And so we've had this sense, several layers of secrets that kind of came up in my life. And what came up this time is that when I was 12 years old, on my birthday, I sat down on the couch in the living room. I can remember sitting. He was standing awkwardly, and I'd like you to sit for a moment. And he told me, "Hey, you have a sister." And I was like, "Cool. I need a sister. I'm in 7th grade. The girls don't talk to me. I'm feeling pretty awkward. I need some insight." He said, "You have a 19-year-old sister. She's in Germany," and I had no idea. And then I was like, "Cool. I get to meet her." I was immediately excited to have this person. I'd been the older sibling, and I was like, "Cool, somebody else can take that job, and I'll have some more leadership to support me." And he said, "No, you can't really approach her." I was like, "Huh? I'm 12. Now keep in mind, I'm 12, but I'm 5'11", which means, what does that mean? And it means 180 or so centimeters. So I look like a grown man, but I'm 12." And he said no, that he had mentioned to my mom, and the details are all fuzzy because I've only gotten snapshots and I got some clarity. But my mother found out early after they were married, and she was very we were shocked, to say the least. And they didn't talk about it for a while, maybe weeks, maybe years. And I didn't hear about it ever till I was 12. And I didn't tell my brother. My brother found out maybe 5 years later. And I'd met her at one point. She's in Germany. She's in Frankfurt. And we've been in, so sidestep, I've been in touch with her for the past year. I texted her at some point in the last year or two online, and I texted her on Instagram saying, hey, do you mind if we stay in touch and text? It's going to be awkward until it's less awkward. How are you for that? No pressure to respond when I ask a thing or share something. No pressure whatsoever. Just want to keep the lines open. So that relationship was like there in the side. And I finally, after being a grown man and like having all these careers, I finally talked to my mom about it, 2 months ago. And she took pause, and then she could tell us her side. That literally I'm, over 40 years old in this world and never brought this up. And she was so gracious and so sweet and so listening from my position, and still being the mother to a little boy, me. And my brother was there too, and it was just such a beautiful space. I'm just so grateful that she was elegant about it, and she talked about her difficulties and how she thought about it, how her fears were showed up with this new consideration. And we got to share so many deeper layers of things. And she said after all the challenges that in her life with her relationship, that everything was worth it because she had the two of us. And as fraught as our relationship might have been at certain times, bringing things up or not, I was just very touched that she would be able to hold the space for us to find a more honest way to be. And then the walls came down. We're all crying at the table. She's hugging us. We're hugging her, trying to be, being supportive, holding the space together in the home she grew up in my grandmother's home. And I'll always remember that table as long as I have my brain, my mental memories, my mental faculties. I'll always remember the space that she held for us. And I remind myself that having 5% more courage to ask what's really in your mind is worth it. And from my child's birth to this moment, to her death, so soon after, just that I hold like gratitude as a space, it's just really empowering. And if there's stuff that has to get off your chest that you're committed to sharing with your parents, like they should know. There's so many pieces where we just like missed each other, our perceptions. And I see it in my kids and me, right? Like I just have a different set of tools behind me, experiences and memories and consequences that my kids have for eating a thing or showing up to a thing or showing up late or saying hi or having manners or not, or whatever the small and big things are. Excuse me. And so, yeah, I say, if there's ever consideration that your parents might die, and that if you even think a little bit might affect you, just write down on a piece of paper what's one thing that you'd like to know at that point, and maybe ask it today.
That's a good point. And I also believe that as parents, if we don't do what we need to do with our parents, how do we expect our kids to do it with us? I would love my kids if there is some untold things around us, so they approach me and talk to me. But if I don't do that to my parents, it's very strange asking that from my kids.
Well, that's exactly right. We are, whether you tell your kids or not, there are barriers. There are things, there are things you're not willing to answer. There are questions you're not willing to ask. There are questions you're not willing to answer. And finding the people around you to test that. Some people are very introverted and they write and they find and they have their own feedback loop. That's great. Most of us need to have that, the play, that game, the sounding board,
Yes.
the back and forth. And so I already know. Like, you tell me, what's one question you have for your father that he has never answered?
I don't have a lot of questions for my
No. What's
father.
one question that shows up that you might ask your dad? Or one topic that you just have want to begin to address? It could be having a tricycle, or him coming to a performance, or leaving you at the airport. I don't know. I don't know him. I don't know you.
My parents divorced when I was 3, and my dad, he would come, but his way of showing love is to buy you things, is to give gifts, which is great. So we never have those honest conversations. We mostly have exchanges of
Wait.
like, I can see that the person loves me,
Uh huh.
but through most of my life, I think subconsciously, because it was never evidently told, and because my parents were separated, he would only come in certain times. Kind of feel, I would still kind of question subconsciously if he loves me or not, which I know deep inside that he does. But there is some disconnect from my life, trying to prove him that I'm worthy of love, and I actually figure it out. But the question necessarily what I would ask, um, yeah, I actually don't know.
Well, one word I like to ask about that you just said is great. He likes the way to show his love is to buy you things, which is great. Is that sarcasm? Is that true? How do you feel about that?
Rajiv, how do I feel about that? Um, I feel sometimes being a parent now, I find that this is not necessarily the best way to appreciate your kids, and everybody does their best.
Hmm.
He did it. I mean, I'm forever grateful for him giving me everything I want,
Hmm.
but deep inside, there is this thing that I'm expecting things to be given to me, which makes my life a little bit harder because everything is like given. When you get gifted so much, it's very hard for you to develop skills like, oh, things might not be given to you, and now you have to work hard. There's always on the back of my head expectation that somebody is going to come and save me, which I find, which is something that I don't gift a lot of things to my kids, not because I could not. I do if they need anything, we get it. But I don't excessively give things to them because I want them to learn that the life is a bit more complicated than that. You have to do something to get something, and life is unfair. So when they grow up, they will learn it. And I don't know, maybe I do that in spite of what my dad was doing. I don't know, but this is how there is some disconnect there that I did not process yet. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, and I think it's worth scratching the surface, right? And as you say things, you have to ask yourself, like, which part is honest, which part is just something you've said told other people. He's given me everything I want. It's true, or it's not true, or it's something you've said a lot of times, and it runs right off. It sounds like he hasn't given you everything you want now. At the time, you may have asked for things, and you got the thing. You got the guitar or the computer or whatever the thing
Yeah,
was you asked for. The thing. Now, everything I want is different than every thing I want, right? And
that's a good
so,
point.
and so it's just so. I'm just trying to figure out for myself, like, what am I committed to creating with my family, and how can I appreciate this moment as well as possible, and then stretching that moment as long as I can practice. For me, the practice of meditation and yoga is to stretch this attention span over time. Um, and so I speak about my mom often in the present tense, and I feel okay about that. Some people say she was. I'm not gonna nitpick that she is doing or was doing to somebody else. But for me, I just find myself telling the story as if her existence continues. Not that I'm deluded that that she hasn't deceased in the form that we have, but I don't think we have I fully understand, where all her energy is. Um, so what is it what is it that I would most love to ask for my mom now that she's gone? What would it most I would most and how does that inform how I asked questions to my father? You know, and how can my strengths that I have up to now support that?
Well, this question about your sister, Um, was that the main thing that you did not resolve because nobody was telling you what really happened? Why you cannot approach her? What was exactly the
Um,
reason why it was so interesting to you?
I just felt that I was being dishonest, and I didn't know what I was protecting even by keeping things quiet. And so, if I have a family, I want to treat them like my family. There shouldn't be a whole like arm of my family that doesn't get love. Separate but equal. Keeping somebody in a different box than this box, and saying, "Don't worry, I love them all the same." There's a difference, and I don't want, I don't want to. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many millions of people are going to hear this gets to. um, but I want people to be free to live their fullest expression. I try to help my fellow stranger, whether they're in the emergency room and the hospital, or in the yoga class, or a branding exercise, or coaching one-on-one, or building homes and designing like natural settings doing the best with natural settings with homes and structures. So how do we?
Let me ask you a question while you're thinking.
Yeah.
Um, I think practice definitely helps you to cope or to process trauma, especially such big trauma as I imagine it is a trauma of losing somebody close to you. Many people don't have a practice, so their natural reaction is just be, observe, or suppress what's coming to them. Um, if somebody would come to you and say that they don't have a practice, and they would say, Rajiv, I think, like we're saying, my grandma is about to pass away at any time, and I don't necessarily have any practice right now, which I know you would say get a practice. But apart from that, uh, how would you mentally prepare for something like that to happen, that when it does happen, it doesn't derail you completely?
There's a few things in there. First, I'm not here to tell you that you need to practice. If someone's asking me what practice they might try on, if they're hungry for something to add to their lives, and we've already touched on it a little bit, which is a practice of gratitude. Literally, get an empty notebook, and every morning you can just say, "I'm grateful for," and name 3 things. And just every day, pick a different thing or different things. And then I ask, what am I committed to creating today and then over the long term? And then I take a step to honor that.
This
And that's,
requires a certain level of awareness.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly. So once you're aware that there's a deficit, if there is a deficit, I'm not saying anyone's not perfect. Everyone's already living plenty of lives without me in their lives, which is fine.
yeah.
And if you're asking, and people do ask because I'm leading workshops at different places around the countryside, then I try to figure out what do you appreciate, and then with all that you're appreciative of, what are you committed to creating? And then if there's anything, and you can be wrong, right? You can be wrong, you can be committed to creating one thing, take steps in that direction for hours or weeks or years, and realize, wow, I've just been focused on helping this one guy, this boss of mine, have a bigger paycheck, have a bigger bank account, or some other subset that you realize that you're not committed to, and you can reevaluate. You've lived a life, and you can decide, what am I committed to creating? And if you're not, then you're basically supporting somebody else's agenda, and you ask yourself if that's okay for now. You
Yeah,
know.
because I assume many people you ask this question, they were not able to answer what are they creating at all, or what are they committed to.
Well, they're committed to creating something. They're committed to whether at the end of 80 years, 90 years, whatever years in your life, you will have donated your life towards something. Whether you made extra money or made less money or whatever it is, you donated your life, and overall, the world changed. The world with you and the world without you are 2 different worlds. And you can ask yourself today, from 2025 to 2000, let's say 45, imagine 2 different 2045s. My dad used to ask me, imagine a world where you don't exist and 20 years happens. And just imagine that world. And then imagine a world where everything you touch shows up. Every imagination you have for the world shows up to the highest level. And then the Earth travels around the sun 20 times.
Yeah.
2045 happens. What's the difference in these two worlds?
I think about that a lot. And I have cognitive dissonance around that. Depending on the day. One day I would be like, yeah, it's definitely very important for me to do what I do. And it touches people. I get a great feedback from these people. The other part of me, the lower part of me, as I call it, says, I cannot remember any names of people who lived, let's say, 2,000 years ago apart from Jesus Christ. None of this really matters. That life is going to go on whether we're here or not, whether we're talking or not, nothing's going to really change. It's only important for me. So, in the end of the day, does it matter? What I'm committed to creating, it only matters to me.
Well, we started the conversation by thinking of who is special in your life. Your parents, your grandmother, your kid, my kids. And then there's a butterfly effect. You do something and then your child does something and maybe 3 generations later, something's possible because you took a stand. You moved to a certain country. You worked in a certain industry. You said definitely no. You took steps with respect to mining or whatever it is, whatever you took a stand for. And somehow there's a feedback loop. I think it does matter. I think if you imagine a chart, right?
Yes.
Got axis here for time, and axis here for community. And your attention span for community is in seconds, minutes, hours, days, decades, eons. And then here, your sense of community is one, just you and your spouse or your person, maybe your kids, maybe your neighborhood, maybe your flag, maybe your race, maybe your species, maybe all of nature, right? And I have this mental exercise that I could imagine if I looked at your last year of Google Calendar or whatever calendar you're using and your last year of spending, I bet I could figure out where on this spectrum you think you have the most impact. Is it really down to me in seconds or me over years? Am I making plans that imagines that I'll be around a year from now? Am I making plans that imagines I'll be around 10 years from now? Am I making decisions that affects a generation or the next generation? And also here, right? So my goal for myself and for the people around me who want to go for the ride is to go from here, from wherever this is to this, to a little bit over here, to consider how big that sense of community, how large that sense of time span could be. And yeah, if you say it's only, fentanyl and cocaine and me in this minute, then and sometimes chemicals compel a shorter attention span. Sometimes cake and cookies and sugar compel a certain time span for food.
Yes.
Right? So from food to housing to clothing to mining to buying things to putting things in your pocket to relationships, you are deciding, you're showing in your commitment to the time frame. Yeah. Right?
Well, that would require you in this regard to think bigger than yourself, because somebody on fentanyl and cocaine can very nicely live a very short life, being super high, die, and don't feel any remorse. The question is it good or bad? I don't think it's for those to judge. But if everybody would do that, then probably we would not move forward. Then most of the people still, what they do is, this is why this podcast is here, so people can listen and have alternative opinions. Because most people do go to work committed to getting paycheck to their boss, committing to paying down the house for no reason, and then essentially passing it to their kids to do exactly the same thing and teaching that this is the only way that they can live. Again, whether it's good or bad, if it makes you happy, it's fine. But what you're saying is it does not bring the world necessarily forward or make it better when you're mostly focused on your small box.
Yeah, you're focused on what you're focused on. Your momentum is your momentum. you're committed to supporting who you are, and I'm here to just have you ask, like, what would it look like if you actually participated to support whatever your highest thinking is, whatever your biggest goals are. And if your biggest goal has to do with a pile of money sitting next to you, or your biggest goal has to do with having a certain academic respect, or what have you, all those things are subsets of how nature actually works. So really, the question for me is like, what's the biggest source code? How do we actually live elegantly within nature as smoothly as possible? Because if my thoughts about my mother to start this conversation include the thoughts of me and the people around me, and if we're essentially spirits that are basically around for eons and dip back in to participate with each other, and I don't know, like I'm not dictating a certain way it would be. I would like for there to be like a smoother, elegant relationship between me and nature. And so if I can participate in that and take steps that support that possibility, great. And if I have new learnings that tell me to think a whole different way, then I'll have to reevaluate that then. So I don't need anyone else to do new things. I just want to do whatever, I want them to do whatever they want to do, like as well as possible, and for the longest time.
Somebody might be listening. Maybe Anatoly 15 years ago might be listening to you.
Yeah.
Or Rajiv being in working in ad agency listening to Rajiv now. They might say, it's easy for you to say. You're living here in Bali, have this beautiful life, doing your yoga, have your time, having beautiful kids.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here paying my debts. I'm getting abused. I'm in a place where there's a war. And this is so selfish of you to say that we all can think bigger than ourselves when I'm just trying to survive. What will you tell them?
I don't have that conversation too often. I did practice medicine for a decade in a very tough neighborhood in the U.S. And we served a community in Camden, New Jersey, where many people had gone through trauma and difficulties, and there's chronic disease, and some of the children, many of the children there are treated badly as a population, enough that they have significant traumas. And so my commitment to them was just to treat them honestly and to offer, when it made sense, to offer just listening, more than just a handful of symptoms, more than just today's stories. I remember one time a man came in, 53-year-old male, and he was overdosed on some kind of opiate, including fentanyl, and he was already reversed. He was on the way to feeling better enough to talk to me. He was found down, like unconscious, revived. The needful medical things were done to support him, and we talked. And I asked him, when did he first ever have opiates? Actually, before that, I asked him, what's the longest you've gone without having opiates? And he said 10 years. And I said, how'd you go 10 years without and got back in? And he said, well, I was in jail. And so if I write in my note, 53-year-old male with past medical history of, and I list the obvious simple thing, opioid dependence, etc., like the what I'm writing frames a certain story. But then I asked deeper to him. I asked him, when did you first ever have any of these drugs? He said, well, when I was 8 years old. And I was like, taken aback. When I was 8 years old, I was hanging out. I wanted to hang out with my brother and his friends. His brother was 15 or 17. And he was like, hey, I want to hang out. And he said, if you want to hang out, you're going to do what we're doing. And so he injected his little brother with some injectable opiate. And he's been hooked since he was 8.
Wow.
And you can imagine your empathy for a 53-year-old man who makes bad decisions, who went to prison, is different than the empathy you have for an 8-year-old child who has no consent, who has no capacity for making the decision. And what's his highest goal? To be like his brother and like hang out and be just relevant, or to be the in-group, right? And so if I write so 53-year-old male with past medical history of opioid dependence in the setting of first being injected as an 8-year-old, it's a different story than just somebody making bad decisions and like, why should I waste my time on him? Now, of course, chemicals are involved. He tends to have the same future that you might imagine for him. But it's just to say, like, how much listening do I have for this guy? And how much listening do I have for that community, for the people around me? And so I'm not here to tell anybody who has a tough life that their life isn't tough. I'm here to say, if you're committed to anything else, I mean, of course, and you got to pay your bills, you got to do your things, you got to live your life by the rules you've already signed up for. That's on each of us and the culture we kind of were born into. We didn't ask to be born in Camden or Kenya or India or Latvia. We just showed up, right?
Yeah.
But if there's a moment when you realize you're on the treadmill and there's something else, some other way of being, and you have the courage to carve out the time to do that thing, to honor yourself, to honor your family because you think it's better for your spouse, your partner, the people you immediately care about, then you have to consider that idea. Can you borrow an extra hour a week, 5 hours a week to do the thing, to be a little healthier? Can you carve out a little, and actually one thing I've learned about health is maybe sometimes it's better to skip a meal than to have a crap meal. I'm not here to tell somebody that they should or shouldn't have McDonald's today. I don't tend to have it. But how do you carve yourself a little time, a little more attention span to think of whatever you think is actually better for you? I don't need you to do the thing I'm doing. I need you to do the thing that you think needs to be done to flex your family's sense of joy, sense of soul to soul, as well as possible. What is your soul like aching to be a part of? I've been just reading and studying about the throat chakra, the sense of expression, creativity, and sharing. And I ask people, in these sessions, like, what comes up for you? What are you aching to share? I ask you about your dad, and maybe I'd press you further if we're interviewing you. And what might show up, right? As you're writing for yourself, as you take a few days to think about, like, what's one thing you could ask him? It doesn't even have to be deep and like solving the whole world. It's just starting a conversation, because the barrier is just having a conversation. And me and my dad too. Like, there are things I just have to like ramp myself up to talk to him, because he's very philosophical and deep and thoughtful. And sometimes I feel like I've got to like earn the right to talk to him, and he's just thinking like, just talk to me whenever you want about anything you want, from batteries to anything.
But I think it's the same, going back full circle, you having a tough conversation with your mom, it's the same as having a tough conversation with yourself. You know what you need to ask yourself, but you don't ask it. And there's a breaking point that's going to happen. So either you going to wait until the breaking point happens and something terrible is going to happen to you if you continue on a path on deceiving yourself that the life you're living aligns with you, or you have a tough conversation with yourself early and change the course of your life. So it's going to happen anyway. The question is it going to happen a easy way or a very hard way? And in this case, tough conversation is also hard, but it's way more easier to do things early on than to propagate things down the road when your health starts to give up, when your mental state starts to give up, or when you want to do something, but because you're old and let's say you cannot do it anymore, then you just have pure regret.
Yeah, a lot of things come up as you like set up that vignette. I'm not here to tell you that your outcomes are going to be terrible, or we all will, like, physically will die, sure. I think the results you've had are the results you'll keep having. And if you want different results, then you might have to participate a different way. Because we can't be surprised that next year the same thing shows up. And yeah, bodies degrade. If you're on the way to diabetes, you'd have to act differently to change the trajectory. And there are ways to do it, and there's people on YouTube and people in the doctor's office who'll have different ways to approach that. I've been really lucky to be with my partner in life, my wife, Alora. She's taken a stand to move towards building out of natural materials with craftsmen here in Asia and around the world now, with hundreds of structures already behind her. And this notion of taking a stand and stepping up and being willing to lose gold and fortune by having certain ideals, it's an interesting idea for one, and it's very it takes energy and heart to execute, and to do it for a long time really well is impressive. Um, I'm here for people who are curious and who think that like whatever I'm talking about makes any sense in their direction. I'm not here to tell you that like your outcome is going to be crap. Most people don't need me in their lives, and most people never know who I am. And 2,000 years from now, they may not know about this conversation, or maybe every conversation you've ever had becomes uploaded on Neuralink for everyone to have, because
Yeah.
that was the beginning of these pads to like just auto download. Um, when you asked about that, also, I was thinking about this treadmill notion that we're stuck in this rat race, that we're stuck working for the same boss, that it's difficult to come off. I'm so curious about the inflection point of like being on the treadmill, to seeing a better way, to considering that better way to be, just by your own standards, whatever that is, and then also people who ask themselves like, what are they betraying to step away, right? When I left advertising, my advertising career on Madison Avenue to pursue yoga, I remember my friend Yanni. He was there in the studio, and he said, "Well, let us know when you actually end up doing something real." And and I felt a little hurt by that, and I felt like, oh man, you don't believe in me, like what's up? And and it's this moment, it's this realizing that like you're betraying a certain way of being. People think I'm an ad executive. It means something. Um, my partner at the time was very surprised that I would like step away from a clear, obviously upwardly mobile career to to being in the subway 5 times a day, teaching yoga. Um, so the questions I'm curious about that I've been kind of flexing in my baby podcast myself is called From Awkward. Like, if you're going from awkward to something else, what is that? You feel like you're on the rat race, you're on the treadmill, and you're like, something doesn't feel right. And then the actual act of imagining another way of being, and then actually pursuing that, carving out 1%, 2%, 5% of your time to try it on the weekends or the evenings. And I'm not saying everyone has to do it. They don't need to do anything. They can live their lives.
Yes.
But when you feel like that has to be tried, and if you feel like there would be regret for not trying it, then I'm here to like help massage that idea. And so I like these conversations. Sorry,
Yeah.
these conversations about people who were in one way of being, saw a different way of being, pursued it, and then have like some reflection on how they went from this way to that way, and they honored something, and they might have felt like they're betraying something else to do that.
I love that. I was reading a tweet by J.K. Rowling, out of all people,
Mm-hmm.
and part of this tweet, she was talking about Emma Watson, but the important part that she said, and she's a great writer, she said that we're often ignorant of our own ignorance. And that stuck with me very well, because I meet people who escaped one way and now pursuing this way that they think is a better way, which is a beautiful spiritual way to live. And then they just jump from one treadmill to another treadmill, maybe a longer or more beautiful or more uh, ecological treadmill, but they're still running a treadmill. And the more you think you kind of ascend in this life and figure out the ways that is closer to you, the more ignorant you are about finding that you are still in a treadmill, because you already changed your identity once. And the thing that will be harder for a lot of these people is to go and make another leap and change his identity twice.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I see that it's everywhere. There's a treadmill. And even people who do yoga, some people come here and then do yoga every day because like there is, it's, I don't know, the world will end if you don't do yoga. People who go to gym every day without stopping, and they're like, well, but look at me, I'm so buffy and I look so good. And I'm like, yes, you're going to gym for 20 years every single day. Have you ever thought what will happen if you don't go to gym for one day? So there's a treadmill. They find the way of coping with their life and being ignorant that they're still in the treadmill. And to me, and I'm talking for myself as well, because sometimes I'm like judging other people saying, well, you're still working on this job, but I'm doing this other thing. Then realizing myself that there's no difference between us. I'm still running on the other treadmill thinking that I know better than somebody else because I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
But in the reality, we might be just running on the same treadmill in the same gym, and I am just delusional, same delusional as them in my own way. But figuring out if I'm ignorant of my own ignorance or not, it's actually quite hard because you attach to things more when you leave other things behind, because now I made this choice, it was very important to me, and here's my new identity. And I think the more you attach, the harder it is for you to understand if you're on treadmill or not. That's my short rant, but yeah, that's come from my head quite often now.
Yeah, feedback matters, Autopilot is autopilot, and a lot of us are fine with it. And not many of us have a lot of friends who know you well enough from different chapters of your life to see which parts stay and which parts you left behind. I'm lucky to have a few key friends, and I don't talk to them every day, but my friend Mike from college, my friend Gautam also from college, a couple of childhood friends, a few family friends, and finding ways to ask for feedback is important. If you care, if you're just to review where you are, and if you want to play a better game by your own standards, then you have to then there's going to be a new board, a new level of participation, and people who when you make bigger and bigger promises, you got to find ways to keep those promises. And that's the first thing I would tell actually all these people is like, make a promise and keep it. Make another promise and keep it, to yourself or to somebody else, to whoever matters to you in your feedback loop. Make a bigger promise in a longer time span and keep it. And you keep doing that. And then you'll find yourself playing at a better place. And if you don't know how to do that, you're constantly drawn back, then ask for help. And then asking for help matters somehow. So being on the treadmill, being buff one day, having a diamond the other day, having a car the other day, having this house in that place with the boat, that could all be like one plane of your life. And the things I've just mentioned are literally things. So another conversation I've had with my father growing up is to ask like which feedback loop really like do you find yourself responding to? And which feedback do you find yourself responding to with your partner in life, and if you have one, and your partner in business, if you have one? Where do you guys gel? And he formed it out in a really elegant way. And he's written a book about this that kind of expands on this as well, which is that there's things. You might think of goods or props or things that you can focus on. So that could even be having, the nice Walkman one day, the nice Apple Watch.
Did you say Walkman?
Walkman like 20 years ago. A nice iWatch
don't know
today,
what
Apple
Walkman
Watch today. And then 20 years from it, it'll be something else. It'll be, showing how you have whatever Tesla or Toyota thing is available or whatever chip is available.
Yes.
There's going to be a thing.
Yeah.
So there's a way to focus on the things. There's a way to focus on the actions, right? And then either if you're focusing on certain actions and activities you can do with your person, whether you like yoga or rafting or hash runs or hiking, whatever it is, like that's a thing you can do. So you can go focus on the things or the actions, or you can focus on the goals. And each thing down here, the things have to support the actions you do. The actions you do have to support the goals you have. The goals you have are based on the imaginations you have about how the world works. And the imaginations you have are based on the facts and how your relationship with how the world actually works in science, in nature, in feedback loops of oceans and storms and physics. And you won't get on a plane if you don't believe that the engineers have made the materials in a way that physics supports you getting from Latvia to Bali, right?
Yes.
And deeper than all that is just your center of self, your sense of persona, your sense of relationship with the highest order thing you can participate with. And all these things are subservient to the higher level order. And if you're participating in one, just flex the other one and just think of where you are in that spectrum. And, for some of us, it gets too tiring to think about that and we just want to get back on the treadmill, and that's fine.
Yes.
But if you're asking, there's conversations to be had, and there's a whole world of pursuing that.
Yeah, I think the challenge I'm having and many other people do have is going in the right track and then just falling behind. And then you're like, I was going so well this time, but no, I ate this cake again, or whatever people do,
Well, are
or
you chasing a number? Are you what's the what can you let's get into it. Like what's the example of that?
I don't want to eat bread, for example. No,
Okay.
that's not my case. I don't eat really bread. I want to drink so much matcha, and I would just
You don't want to drink so much
yeah.
matcha.
People listening like fuck off. Shut up. His problem he doesn't.
No, this is fine. Like so
No,
having
because I analyze myself very well, so I know I think I was talking to Matteo here, who's a great guy, and he was saying that the more you do things, the more subtleties you notice in your life that you need to change to get better. So when I'm saying matcha, I just know that if I choose something that I decided to, let's say, not to do anymore,
Mhm.
if I do this subtle change in one place, everything else gonna fall apart at some point. Like let's say I don't want to eat chocolate, and then if I'm at the party gonna eat a piece of chocolate, I know that down the line that choice made me to have a bunch of chocolate in my house and eat chocolate. Why is eating chocolate bad? Because I choose not to eat chocolate. I feel better when I don't. But that small eating of the chocolate will result me in oversleeping, watching Netflix, getting angry down the line, and all those kind of things. So this subtle choice I made 6 months before will get me off the track, and I will get back on a track in 6 months.
Uh-huh.
But I will find another way how to sabotage it and get back to my lower self. And I think this is the biggest struggle. It's not about setting out goals. It's not about doing the right thing in a moment once you're aware and have a good practice. It's about those things of I'm just gonna eat this one small piece of chocolate today. Nothing bad's gonna happen, and then you're fat and depressed 2 years down the line because it all started with a small, subtle choice that you allowed yourself to make.
Mm.
You didn't expect it gonna go that way, but here you go.
So what's the question?
Uh, it's not a question. It's more of a comment
Uh-huh.
that the hardest thing. The question is how to avoid that, but I don't think there's an answer. Um, the thing is that a lot of people know what they need to do. They have those goals. Actually day in day out. A lot of them, especially high achieving people, they do the right thing
Mhm.
until they don't. Until they start to give up on the dream by doing a small things that derail their life, and then it's like a constant cycle, which is a treadmill. The treadmill you run around.
Yeah. So um yeah, there's temptations everywhere. And we already talked about
How do you deal with
opiates,
them? That's a
opiates and
question.
fentanyl and diabetes.
Yeah.
Um I think I'm immediately just drawn to the notion of one of my mentors said, the most important thing is to keep the most important thing the most important thing. And to focus on whatever that biggest picture is what I try to do. I think if you have chocolate or alcohol or other more addictive drugs or behaviors, like the you have if you know that the temptation's there. Look, chemical, alcohol, and opiates are a whole different process. So
Yes.
getting into that, it's not just as easy as listening to me in this conversation and saying, oh, well, Rajiv said blah, blah, blah. And so clearly I'll just be healed. Um, but to the extent that you have capability and capacity and there's no like real chemical hardwiring, and there's an argument to say that there is a chemical dopamine like pattern that tends to happen. The question I ask myself is like, okay, well, guess what? Chocolate's going to be there. When I go to Alchemy or I go to the grocery store, I go to the fridge and I have little humans around me, there's chocolate accessible to me. And when I see chocolate, what's the first thing I'll do? And so I literally would ask myself in this question, in this case, I'm craving chocolate. When I crave chocolate next, I'll have a sip of water, and I don't know if you want to do a push up or go for a walk, but just do one thing, and then at the end of that thing, ask yourself, can I have a piece of chocolate? And it doesn't have to mean everything. Like it's not everything has to be all or nothing, right? And so part of your chocolate story can include like some chocolate. Like it doesn't have to be like purgatory and jail and imprisonment and being committed to like, well, now that I'm off the thing, I'm gonna have, I don't know, a whole box of chocolates. So I don't really like I'm not an addiction physician. Um, I hope for myself that if I'm focusing on the biggest things and excited about the biggest things and participating to support that, then the small things fall in line.
What is your biggest thing right now?
Um, my the biggest my biggest use of time week to week for months now is working at Ibuku. Um, Ibuku is I'm a co-founder of Ibuku with my wife Alora. We design it's an architectural studio that designs beautiful buildings made of natural materials and local craftsmanship around the world. And we've been able to design 300 buildings and built many of them with our sister company, which is nearby. And I think it's a very big idea that it's now spreading into other groups to do in Colombia, across Asia, and now into Australia and more of the world to say, hey, how do we do that? Do we have to code to make buildings that stand for hundreds of years when we know we're going to change them anyway? And so adding beauty. What we're actually really doing also was this deep conversation we're having about how do you redefine beauty at all. Stefan Sagmeister wrote a beautiful book called Beauty, and how we designed for different eras to support the highest political considerations of the time, and that beauty in communist Russia is different than beauty in brutalist Boston versus other places. And I think we've come to a point where, of course, there's beauty in nature, and that's one thing. But beauty in design, we're trying to reconsider it, to say that beauty is elegance within nature, and beyond that, beauty is elegance within nature, such that humanity is received by the biosphere longer. Meaning, if you're taking steps to make something look good or feel glorious or joyous, that it should be using practices and materials and maybe chemicals or whatever that allows humanity to exist longer and longer with the biosphere. And so there's different examples that come to mind about that in different industries. But we're just asking for how is that possible? How do we exist with the earth for as long as possible and be creative and be playful so that we're part of this biggest picture? Because the earth's going to be here. It has 3.5 billion more years before the sun gets bigger and swallows up Mercury and the rest of us. But in the meantime, there's the innovation, the creativity, the participation. I think we'll find ways. And so that's my current focus as far as most of my time.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate you. Is there a message you want to leave based on everything we discussed to the viewers and listeners of this?
I guess I'll stick with the theme that we started. If there's people in your life who you appreciate and there's a chance that they don't know, let them know. Yeah, and ask a question. Ask a question of them that honors your gratitude to them.
Cool. That's man. Appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching.